Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins podcast with your host, Ashley Crowder.
Hi, welcome to Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins. I'm Ashley Crowder, and I am so excited. Today, we're here with Paul Doherty, the current founder of Digit Group and one of the founding team members of Revit, which really changed the industry with 3D design for the AEC industry. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate this. And hello, everybody.
Yeah. So, you're often described as a pioneer in the built environment and digital transformation. Can you share a bit about your journey into the space and what really inspired you on this long 3D journey, founding of the Digit Group and before that Revit?
When I was in school, I did well. So they gave me a choice in my third year at architectural school to take a semester off and then come back for a semester. So it would elongate my time in school. But what it was doing was that it was inviting me into an internship that would allow me to cut down the amount of hours I would need before I had to sit for my architectural license. So I said, I can do that. I was going to school in Manhattan. But I could have gotten a job at probably any of the architectural firms out there, but I'd be doing bathroom details. Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
So I had an offer from IBM in Armonk at headquarters to be their global designer for their trade show booths. I'm going, I could do that. So I had to learn about all these computers, everything from mini mainframes to these PS2 personal computers. And I had to learn everything about them. So computer engineers and systems engineers used to come and teach me about all these things because I had to learn it in order to showcase it at a trade show. So I learned quickly that the way that hardware and software work was very similar to the way that we turn on buildings. And I also saw that there was this thing called OEM, or other equipment manufacturers. And I said, well, okay, so there's these motherboards, there's memory, there's all these things, but IBM doesn't make them. They just put them together. And I'm going, isn't that a general contractor? Because a general contractor doesn't own a door company or a window company or a roof company. Other equipment manufacturers supply them and they assemble it. So I've had this itch, actually, my entire career that started then saying, why can't a building become a computer? If it's the same thing, why not? It's just different components. Yeah. And what would happen then if those components could communicate with us more effectively, more efficiently? So, ultimately, what happens when one building then gets connected to another building? Isn't that the Internet of Buildings? So I've had this idea for a long time, and it's just now starting to come true. So when I came out of school with this tech background, I immediately started to look at the existing way of how we build buildings, everything from homes, kitchen blowouts to skyscrapers. And what I noticed was that there was not a lot of automation. And I was like, man, with the stuff that I know, we could really make a difference by saving time, saving money, better quality. And that's been something, me pushing a boulder up the hill since 1987. Right, wow. A long time. So when I was also towards the later part of my internship, doing the work study, work, go back to school and whatnot, I decided that I wanted to take CAD, and I took a course at the Parsons School in Midtown Manhattan, and it screwed up my Saturdays for about a year. But what I quickly learned was that all CAD was an electronic pencil to what we were doing. And I always thought that there's got to be a better way. So I would look at other industries, and that's what I still do today, looking at innovations happening in other industries and see if some of those could be implemented here in the built environment, again, to create a better built environment, something that is more inspiring, that can be safer, healthier, and sustainable. So that's really where the genesis happened, was me working with IBM way back in the day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, CAD was the first major step. I mean, it was crazy that people would be like hand drafting entire buildings with a pencil and a piece of paper. Is insane to me. But that's where we were. And then CAD was like the computer aided design version, still 2D. And then Revit was really one of those first to bring it to 3D, which that jump, it's just incredible of how much more information you can embed and understand and share But to your point, I mean, the construction industry is traditionally resistant to change. But you've really been leading efforts to digitize and innovate. So, explain like how you saw that adoption of Revit and 3D design, and what are some of the biggest hurdles and opportunities you see for digital transformation in the field?
Wow. Yeah. Well, we still have a long way to go. And a lot of that has to do with when you put a good technology into practice, it should be transparent to the process. It should be like magic. Well, that's the way that should have happened, right? The fact that you have all these consultants for BIM, working, that shows that the technology still is not matured yet. The market's maturing from the standpoint of we've designed building information modeling for a profession that didn't exist back in the day. It was never meant to be a design tool. That was one of the functions of it. Excuse my sort
Yeah.
of change of seasons. but when we designed it, it was really meant for what is now known as virtual design and construction professionals. But this is an important phrase because I'm saying design and construction, right? Virtual design and construction. That means you have to understand how to design and you also have to know how to construct. One of the things that 3D brings, and it's something that really caught my eye because back in the mid 90s, there was a big push for browser based technologies. People were looking at AOL and CompuServe and calling that the internet, right? But it was really about the browsers. And so I decided to write a book about it called Cyberplaces. And the book itself is something, I actually have a copy and I didn't realize it. Oh, wow.
Nice.
The way that I wanted this to come around, so nice little book, right? Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is with RS Means was the publisher. And this really tried to describe all the different tools that made up the internet back in the day and how it could practically be used in design, construction, and facility management, following the life cycle of every building. Now, what was really interesting back in the day was that everyone was rushing to say, wow, we could actually have a lot of information on this website and we could manage projects with it. So project specific websites were all the rage. And people were throwing tens of millions of dollars at these things with startups that only had maybe a PowerPoint, let alone a website. And it was crazy. It was the .com craze, right? Well, there was this little company out of Cambridge, Massachusetts that said, we have a 3D parametric CAD tool and it's on the desktop, has nothing to do with the internet, but could you help us? And I'm like, why the hell did I help you? I'm Mr. Internet. I wrote the book on it, right? But they convinced me that this was a different way of communicating, that they could take design intent and communicate more effectively with the constructors. I'm like, that is a very sound strategy. Let's roll up our sleeves and work. So it was this little office that on Mass Ave in Cambridge, Massachusetts, up above a Domino's Pizza. And they were called Charles River Software. And it was a very interesting piece of technology because it just wasn't 3D. It was exactly what you said. It was 3D, but with the potential of having data management in behind it. So we renamed it from 3D parametric CAD because the thing that I loved, because I was a hand drafter back in the day before CAD, right? If there was ever a change, you'd have to go through all the different sheets and make sure that the revisions were done on every sheet, right?
Nightmare.
With this, I could change it in 3D and everything else just fell into place. I'm like, okay, that's worth the price of gold right there, right? So we got involved, started to massage it for use in architectural practice. And then we looked at it from the aspect of how a big firm would use it as opposed to a sole practitioner. So we really went through a good iteration to market this thing. And we renamed it Building Information Modeling. We also renamed Charles River Software to Revit. And we had about $800,000 worth of sales when Carol Bartz and her team over at Autodesk bought us for $133 million. That was a really, really good day. I said, screw architecture.
Pretty awesome. Yeah.
I'm just going to be there for the tech, right? But, but now because we were designing it for a management purpose, architects were the lifeblood of Autodesk and they sold it as a design tool. I think we lost a good decade trying to push that boulder up the hill because it really was not matched well. Even the algorithms there were just not 100% there. You get up to a certain amount of data inside of your model, and it would freeze. I mean, lots of mistakes with this thing, but it was the seed that was planted. To Autodesk's credit, they spent a lot of money redeveloping Revit, and then people started to see the adoption factor shift from design to people that had to implement, mostly subcontractors,
Hmm.
interestingly enough. Because the GC, what they would do is they get drawings, or in this case, a digital model, and they hand it off to the subs because they're the ones that have to do the work, right?
Yeah.
So GCs act as like a middleman when it comes to this digital transformation. But an interesting thing happened when we started to see that type of passing of the information. It goes back to exactly what we do in our industry, which is the designers communicate design intent. And in 3D, you can communicate better, right? Instead of interpreting in 2D and having to learn all these symbols and whatnot, you could just look at it in 3D. So if you live in 3D, we act in 3D, we should be designing in 3D and constructing from 3D. Actually, I'm still waiting for that to happen. We
We're
still
working on
go
it. Yeah. We're
slowly,
trying to help.
slowly and surely. But what's interesting is the maturation of what I thought was going to happen quickly. Um, People fall back into their comfort zones really quick, and regulatory also has a role here. The
Hmm.
majority of people that use Revit or any type of building information modeling software to create the design in 3D, their deliverables are still two-dimensional plans like blueprints. It's like, well, why don't you just stick with AutoCAD? You were better at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Oh, I was going to say
yeah.
I agree that that regulatory piece is important, and I am at least seeing in the industry. I mean, the interoperability of the 3D asset is really important because if you're trying to share this across organizations, from the architect designer to the GC to the sub, it needs to be seamless and easier, or they will just be like, whatever, just give me the old plan. But at least in the manufacturing space, where we're working with some big mining clients and others who design parts that go into these big plants, which is similar. It's still the built environment but more industrial. They're actually getting contracts that require sharing of the 3D model now, which I thought was very interesting.
Mhm.
And so at least that industry is saying, hey, this 3D model, to your point, we need it because it makes our lives so much easier and better, and reduces rework because it's so much more clear to the sub of what they've got to do. um, is important. But for that to happen, uh, you know interoperability is key. And so if you've got a Revit file, but then your sub doesn't have a license to Revit, what do you do? So curious, what you think interoperability standards need to look like, and how do we make this work for construction and smart cities?
Yeah, so when you're talking about manufacturing, either through consumer grade products as the output, or B2B, that type of thing, the supply chain of that is defined, and there are contracts in place, and there are schedules and budgets, and it's not as chaotic as building a building, right? Where building a building, you can kick a subcontractor off and get another subcontractor in, but is that subcontractor even understanding what they're contracted to do? I mean, that happens. Or equals, right? Value engineering, where you have a Kohler toilet, but this guy found something cheaper at Home Depot, and he substitutes it, right? Now, how does the digital transformation fit into that when you're talking about human condition, and also then human cognition, meaning
Hmm.
that the majority of people in the construction industry, they learn through repetition and through relationships that either have been inherited, like it's your dad's framing company and you take it over, to people that are new to the industry and they come into it, uh, where in certain cases people need bodies, right, in order to swing hammers and saw and do all this stuff. Unfortunately, the quality level of that is all over the place, and you can only control so much. So what we decided to do way back in the day, like in the 90s, was why don't we start to take a look at standardization of process and allow the technology to actually become the solution over time. So I'm very fond of process mapping, meaning how work gets done. I would guesstimate that 98 to 99% of all the firms that make up the built environment in our country don't even know what a process map is, let alone have one.
Yeah.
So they only know how work gets done through communication, repetition over time, but they don't process map it. It's almost like they instinctively know what to do. They know all the safety factors. They can go through training. They can do all this stuff. But unless you process map it, you should never implement a technology, meaning that you have to know what to automate, where, when, and how. And that's just within your organization. Now, your organization, depending on your role, you're only on that project for a short amount of time when you're scheduled, right? Very rare that even an architect that goes right from pre-design all the way through facility management, there's different people even within that architectural firm that won't be on that project the entire time, right? So that means that tools that can interoperate become vital to successful projects, because the handoffs to people, they have to understand, what am I inheriting, and then what am I leaving behind. So again, getting back to design intent, um, I was working with a group out in San Francisco, advising them on a project for the San Francisco Giants baseball team. And they were moving from Candlestick Park, which was in the suburbs, into downtown San Francisco. And they needed to communicate design intent to get the blessings of the mayor and the city council and whatnot. And they didn't want to spend money on heavy 3D software to do it. Number one, expensive. Who's going to do it for me? Yada, yada, yada. So this group called Planet Nine, they worked with me, and I said, listen, I think we can do it on a piece of software that's free. And they're like, what? And I said, web browsers. I said, let's take the HTML and let's go to a friend of mine down in Silicon Valley that was working with this newer type of protocol called VRML, virtual reality markup language. So we did it, and it was very successful. It was free. People freaked out because they could see the San Francisco Giants baseball stadium without the use of traditional software. So there's the screenshot of it. That is
Nice.
a Netscape browser. That's how old this thing is. And this book was published in 1997. That was 1996 we were doing this. We called it the metaverse.
Wow.
We've been at this a very, very long time. So to your point, that model did not need to have all the information that made it up, like what we do today with building information models. It was meant for a certain audience. So that meant that the 3D geometry needed to have a certain level of detail to make it look like it was real, right? So that level of detail meant that it was close to photorealistic. But to others, we didn't have to have that level of detail. Sometimes people work better off sketches because that's what they're used to, right? Like
Mhm.
a riser diagram for an electrician. Do they want to see a full-blown 3D model? Of course not. But to others, you do need that, right? So again, communicating that design intent, to your point, you do not need to have those heavy models, but we are looking for solutions that can create roles about what that information needs to be. But that means you need to have a centralized system, like a digital asset management system, to pull from, because that could be the single source of truth.
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly, at Ventana what we're trying to help people do. They've invested so much in these 3D designs, whether it's Revit or others, but being able to have that centralized place, automate those different levels of detail, to your point, because somebody on a job site just wants to quickly pull something up on their phone to see exactly where the toilet needs to go and which one it is, but they don't need the full thing. And so I think that's so important. But with that, I agree, web is the place to do that. So they, just on your phone, everyone's got a cell phone, you can pull it up. You don't necessarily need a huge desktop computer with every CAD license possible. It's not going to be happening on a job site,
And
So
depending where you are in the United States, which market you're in, this could be a mission critical um, uh, workflow process.
yeah.
And here's a case in point. So I live in the Sun Belt. I live in Memphis. Everything from Florida up to Memphis, going all the way out to California. We have a very large community of Hispanic speakers.
Hmm.
So I thought it was always like a very easy thing to do. I would take my Revit model and convert it into Spanish, translate. How cool, right? Google
Yeah.
Translate. And I thought that that solved the problem. No, it compounded the problem, because the problem with a lot, not all, of that community is that a lot of them are illiterate. They don't even know how to read Spanish. So I converted it for no reason, which
Yeah.
is why 3D becomes such a huge deal to communicate design intent. Because I can create now work packages that when those tapers are coming onto my project to tape up the drywall, I know I can show them, this is what you do today. You go from this point to this point, tape. Okay,
Yeah.
they get it, right? So the rework goes down in the field. There's no miscommunication, and things just get easy. So you're 100% correct. Having a device like a phone, originally I thought it was a safety hazard out in the
Mm.
field. Now it's as important as the tool that you use for your trade.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, if if picture explains 1,000 words, a 3D model explains a million, and without anything, that's huge. And so, are there any specific projects you can think of where but the baseball stadium is a great one, but any other ones you want to highlight where you've really seen digital twins, reshaping this entire design, construct, and built environment?
Yeah, and I think definitions are probably um, necessary in order to follow the storytelling that needs to happen in our industry. So digital twins, when they were first starting to define what they are unto themselves, I looked at other industries and they were doing a good job of the descriptions. It was literally a mirror image of what's in reality. Right now,
Mhm.
BIM has always promised that, but I can promise you the majority of BIM is not. One thing about hand drafting, which is where I grew up, literally having to roll up my sleeves so I didn't get, lead on my shirt and all sorts of things that no longer exist. Right. Um, I was in a drafting pool. That was a very large room with drafting tables, and there would always be more experienced designers just walking, passing through, and by happen chance, maybe they caught something. Maybe your lettering was off that day, or your dimension lines were just a little off, and they'd stop and ask a question. Imagine that, talking with each other,
Yeah.
handing down knowledge from one generation to the other that was not meant to be like in a classroom, but just in the flow of work. And they would say, what are you working on over here? Well, I got this detail. It's like, well, that's not the way that we do it. This is what we learned. That type of communication now is almost lost when you get involved with the the myopic view of zooming in and zooming out on a computer screen, right? So this is where we started to take a look at the world of 3D and digital twins in a very unique way, where BIM is one communication channel, right? And that's a very, very heavy model that can be used between architect and engineer, the engineers and experts and other systems and blah, 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 in order to create the digital version of what will be a building, both
Hmm.
interior and exterior. But with digital twins, what we found is that depending on how you want to work with the information, that defines what it is. And let me give you an example. So there is there's this notion that you can take uh, the building information model, and if you wanted to show the interior, there are tools that you can purchase and use that will give you the ability to create a path so that someone can walk through it, right?
Hmm.
But that's staging information. What really was the big breakthrough about a decade ago was the massive use of gaming engines, things like Unity and Unreal and things like that. Now you're giving the end user the ability to walk through the space of what they want to see. Now things get very interesting. We call that a virtual world, right? Meaning that
Hmm.
the digital twin now is your virtual world. You can discover what that design intent is, or you can look around and say, "Hey, listen, that's not quite right. This is how we do it," and then communicate that back to the designer so that they can make the change. This is where we're getting into the world of large BIM and tiny BIM, right? Where
Yeah.
there's a massive amount of information, but maybe just the proper information. So, large BIM, little BIM, and also this idea of moving from digital twins into virtual worlds. Eventually, those virtual worlds, through things like standardization, being able to take objects and be able to share them in environments that are outside of the authoring tool. That's a big one, right? Because the authoring tool, they want you to be proprietary. But once you now emancipate it, right, and give it the freedom it needs, now all of a sudden we can start to link things together. That is the promise of what the metaverse will be, is this linking together over time outside of the authoring tools that originally created it.
Right. In that real time environment. So Unity, Unreal, game engines, NVIDIA's Omniverse, a lot of people are
Yes.
starting to use, but having that real time technology. So to your point, someone can walk through and see it. I mean, my mother has redone the kitchen I don't know how many times. My poor dad, that's not what I thought it would look like. So, avoiding that type of rework is incredible. But that's really the power of what real-time technology that's developed in the past 10 years has enabled. And I know I'm so excited about it. I mean, how do you see the technologies and practices evolving over the next 5 years? What do you see becoming standards?
Things that make money is really where the rubber meets the road, and that's where massive adoption happens. And let me give you a case in point. So we designed a theme park in Qingdao, China, called the Virtual Reality Theme Park, right? And it was meant to be an experiential theme park, in that when you design a traditional theme park, they even design that being on the line to get into the ride is part of the experience. Then you do your 7 or 8 minute ride, and then you come out into a retail establishment. That's the Disney model, it's the Universal model, blah, 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 blah.
Works very well. I just went to Disney.
Yeah, and Imagineering does a great job with managing people that way. And they actually have an amazing display of data based upon demographics. So let's say you're a family of 4, traditional family of 4, a son and a daughter out of Cleveland, Ohio, down on spring break into Orlando, and you are now standing in line for the Avatar piece. It's about 90 minutes. They can tell that you're going to make a right-hand turn when you get outside of the retail establishment. 85% of the time. The other time, you may go left. So what they do is that they manage through, like on a map, all these dots, and they go through simulations to help understand the flow of people, and also then for security and safety. How do I do that inside of a virtual reality environment? Because I have AR people that are looking through, like a phone or a tablet with people that are immersed in goggles. I can't commingle those people because there's injury and all sorts of things that happen. Plus, they're in a virtual world. Do they even need the pavilion? Well, yeah, you do, because you need to sell merchandise and stuff like that. But the bottom line is the space between the buildings now become part of the theater, right? So we had to really rethink and reimagine, for safety, security reasons, and also for entertainment reasons. How do we start to manage people in a way that provides them the illusion that they're doing self-discovery, yet we're actually forcing them to make that right-hand turn or whatever it is, right? So then we started to take a look at the 3D geometries in a very unique way. We put it onto a gaming engine, and we released it up on the internet, so that Tencent, who was one of our big tenants, could have a portal to all of their titles, everything from World of Warcraft to League of Legends, all these famous games, except that in China, the phone's games are the largest in the world, right? So now we had to really rethink things to say, right, could we release this and have people pay for download? In other words, let's make our 3D Revit model on a gaming engine a revenue center. We saved 18% of our construction budget before we opened up the gates, because people paid, follow the money, paid to be part of that experience. It also doubled down that they wanted to experience it in real life, because we have a 1-to-1 Fortnite Island. I want to go see it, right? And then, of course, we sell merch and all sorts of things, and they want to come back. It's the Disney model. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you just told them, and now it becomes a continuous improvement cycle. That is how I'm seeing 3D, and more importantly, the data behind the 3D being a huge driver for growth over the next half a decade, 25 years in the future, because now you're getting down to touching people's experiences and their feelings and how they can be inspired, right? So I think that, as we move forward, I'm looking at the Web3 technologies being integrated seamlessly into these 3D geometries in order to provide those good storytelling and those good experiences for branding, marketing, all of that type of stuff. So when I hear things like crypto, I immediately go, that's interesting. Could we tokenize our models and our projects and then start that process? That's going to be a very interesting thing to keep tabs on. Can we start to take things like smart contracts
Mm-hmm.
out of blockchain and start to create a different relationship between people and between the contractual obligations they have, especially when it's transparent? My goodness. I mean, I can't hide behind a contract or not fulfill it. Not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, crypto's gotten such a bad rap over the past couple of years, but the technology is really incredible because it is determining the single source of digital truth of this 3D asset and who owns it. And I actually had an interesting, podcast with Albie Galutin, who's working on digital rights management,
Mm-hmm.
using the blockchain technology to ensure this 3D model is owned by Toyota, or this 3D design architectural is owned by this architect. And so it becomes so much more valuable and clear, who owns what, and what is a real design versus a knockoff, and is so important. And I know with the Digit Group, you're doing a lot around the designing of smart cities, and so that installation in China is super interesting. But I'm not sure if you have an example of how the 3D visualization and digital twins are really contributing to smarter and more sustainable urban environments as well. I know, which a lot of people care about right now.
Yeah, in the Middle East, I can point to a project that a lot of people do know about. 2016, I was brought over by McKinsey Company and uh, Boston Consulting to work with them in Riyadh for a number of months to create a roadmap for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to transform itself. It's called Vision 2030. My chapter, I was responsible for the City of the Future, which is now called NEOM. So that's my baby. Not the line, by the way. I'm not a big fan of the line, but we'll see how all this works out. But the idea of smart cities actually came out of the world of 3D. Because of the success we had with Revit being sold, Buzzsaw was another one that we sold to Autodesk, and Tririga that was purchased by IBM, my old alma mater.
Nice.
I had some very good success with that. Created a lot of value and revenue for the different investors. So I was a little bit of a darling, still am, up and down Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley. And they would hold events, these VCs, the Sequoia Capitals, and back in the day, Silicon Valley Bank, rest in peace, and all these different groups. And I got invited to be part of these little get-togethers. During one of these get-togethers, I was introduced to a gentleman named Remy Arnaud. Remy is one of the rolled-up businesses that became Google Earth. It used to be called Keyhole. And he was telling me that he wasn't really happy with his time at Google because he felt that Google Earth in particular was kind of dumb. It's like, he was the guy that did the tiling. It was called intrinsic. Like you come up from, the space, and then you come down to the continent, down to the state, down to your house, right? He said that took a lot of time because it was all imagery. But then you had to attach data to the imagery in every aspect. Street view to this day, it's all just images when they're just dumb. He said, I really feel that data should drive the geometry. So we created a tool called Orbi. And what Orbi did for us was that it just wasn't about seeing one project in a proprietary piece of software. I could see adjacent properties. I could see entire districts. I can see entire cities, all in a browser, and it was remarkable what we
Wow.
did there. So IBM came around again and said, "We'd like to purchase this thing from you," and I said no. And I rolled up my sleeves and I rededicated the Digit Group to being a real estate development group that had the tool that no one else had, which was Warby. So we got involved with working with large scale projects. At the time, China was going through a huge transformation of putting in high speed rail to connect cities. But then once you connected the city, they were digging up these ancient cities and new cities for two reasons. Number one, they had a thing called the Sponge City program that was helping with the flooding that was happening because of the undersized piping that was
Mm.
all throughout all these cities. The second thing was they were digging for subways, especially
Mm.
Shanghai and Beijing. Beijing was going for the 2008 Summer Olympics. 2010 was the World Expo in Shanghai. So they dug up all this stuff and they installed all of the subways to help with the high speed rail that connect the cities. And suddenly I had a platform. I could actually show them what to do, how to manage these things in 3D. And that's where the term smart cities actually came from. It was part of IBM's Smarter Planets, Smarter Cities, Smarter Building program. So
Very
that's
cool.
when, yeah, that's when I wrote this, which was actually how to do smart cities. And it was not just on the technology side of things. Technology drove the message, right? But it was to get people to communicate better so that they can actually take control of their own built environment. And that's the big thing about smart cities. It's not so much the innovations and the technology behind it. It's, can you enable its inhabitants to start taking a better approach to understanding how they live and how they operate? Because it's very jarring when I go to these smart city conferences everywhere, and people have all the solutions. And I'm like, yeah, but did you actually ask the people that actually live there and work there and visit there?
Yeah,
Are
are
they,
they gonna
are they
actually
enjoying it?
yeah, are they gonna operate in the way you
How
expect? Yeah.
obnoxious to impose your will onto
Mm.
other humans. It's like, there's a term for that. It's called a dictator, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's not something that like you really want to do. So yeah, in the Middle East, I got very lucky with NEOM. Actually worked with leadership in the UAE for Expo 2020. But here in the States, I have a brand new project, and it's like one of the coolest things ever. It's in Miami, and we're about to announce it publicly. So this is actually the first time others can hear about it, and it's called the Miami International Maritime Museum. Now, there is no maritime museum in Miami, which was staggering. I thought, I mean, they're all about ships, especially today
One
with
of the
cruise
biggest
lines and everything,
ports in the country.
right?
Yeah.
So what happened was I got introduced to a gentleman named Yuri Sandana. He's Brazilian, but comes from a Lebanese heritage. Very unusual, right? Very UN.
Yeah.
And he's an award-winning documentary guy. Does documentaries that have impact. He's very well known in the IMAX circles and stuff like that. So he's been working on a documentary on the Amazon. They discovered shipwrecks at the mouth of the Amazon River, and what they did was they found some of the wood. They went ahead and they wanted to look at the carbonization to find out
Mm.
where's the wood from, what type of ships these were, and everything. It was cedar from Lebanon. What
Wow.
is that doing there, right? And they estimated that it's 3,000-year-old wood. So
Wow.
what they theorized was that if they could rebuild the boat done back in the day, just like they did in the Phoenician period, that they could prove that the Arabs, the Semitic Arabs, were the first ones to discover the New World, not the Vikings and not Columbus. So,
Wow.
so Saudi Aramco heard wind of this and said, Arabs discovered the New World. We'll put some money into that. The Smithsonian Institution then said, we're going to cover this. And they did it. They built the boat. What they did was they sailed it all the way through to the Dominican Republic, and they wound up in Miami. And so we're going to be showcasing the Phoenician ship that actually has now an IMAX movie, filmed about this thing. We're going to showcase it as a way not just of showcasing the boat, but all maritime to celebrate that, and more importantly, everything about water, the
Mm.
rising sea levels. Why are we going through a period of construction in Miami like it's never seen before? But they're building it like it's 1970, guys.
Mm.
Your first 4 floors are going to be underwater in the next 10 years. Why are you building like this? I mean, the insurance companies are going to go crazy, right? So what we're doing is we're building underground on the
Mm,
sea. We're right at the sea level because it's counterintuitive because you think you want to go up with stilts. No, 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 no. You want to go down and embrace the water, almost like a big bath
mm.
without the water inside. So we're
Yeah.
doing this whole experience based upon the same technology that the founders of IMAX left IMAX because they did not. The publicly traded company IMAX now did not want to go to an IMAX 2.0. It's just too expensive to change all their theaters. So they left their baby and they created COSM, COSM. This is the technology that's behind the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Hmm.
Immersive way of really starting to get into, this shading of almost holographic, but you're sitting in this amazing destination that's changing rock music. It's changing, movies.
It's incredible. It's VR without the headset. The Dolans are actually one of our largest investors, and so I got to see the test mini sphere like a few years before it opened. It's incredible.
Well, then Tyler and that team, that's their technology. Now they're creating their own destinations. There's one at SoFi Stadium in LA. That's incredible. That shows, like during the World Series, they projected Yankee Stadium inside of this LA-based COSM, and it
Hmm.
looked like because they actually had the TV broadcast in the COSM. I'm like, why are there so many Dodger fans in Yankee Stadium? It was that convincing. I didn't know. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So they just opened up one in Dallas Fort Worth as well as destination places, and the fourth one in the United States is going to be in Miami at the Miami International Maritime Museum. And what we're doing is we're changing the way that we use museums as an experiential center. But more importantly, all the 3D that we're doing, we're going to be taking a page right out of the VR theme park in Qingdao, China. We're going to be opening up a year before it's built, and we're going to have people pay to be inside of these experiences virtually. So that's one way that we're going about it. Again, it's pushing the limits of virtual worlds and
Hmm.
how can you practically make things happen? Because this is going to be a showcase for Miami to say the horse has left the barn. You think you're going to lower the temperature of the earth? Good luck with that. Climate change is here. Sea levels are going to happen. So let's start building differently. And here's a showcase of one example of how. So this immersive way of working also then gets into how this business model works. In that, when the Miami Dolphins, the Heat, the Florida Panthers, and the Florida Marlins, when they're on away games, we're going to be lit up as if you now are in Chicago or Yankee Stadium or whatever it is, showcasing those things. So this goes beyond the time that you're open as a museum. It becomes now a true destination center. So we're having a lot of fun with this. It's going to have a lot of things that people haven't seen before. We are tokenizing the entire project. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch
Awesome.
how the value of digital real estate over time will be worth more than the actual physical real estate itself. That's my goal, is to prove out that type of world. And actually, for all your listeners out there, this is like the greatest time to ever be involved with technology and its interface with the built environment, because this cyber physical relationship is something like we've never seen before. And I think we're just starting to just take the tippy toe of our toes out there and starting to feel the water, because now all of a sudden this becomes a very, very big deal, because there's practicality behind it, there's real money behind it, and the experiences, well, all I can say is that I'm really happy that we're going to be able to at least provide 1/10 of what's going to really, really happen as more people get involved and their ideas then become part of this entire process.
No, it's the opportunity is huge. As you said, we're really just touching the iceberg, and there's so much real value, not just as we've talked about, reducing costs, reducing rework, increasing your speed to market and going live and getting revenue beforehand. So, what is your advice for, GCs or architects out there of, how do they get started? Where would you begin if you're trying to digitally innovate within your organization?
I would absolutely start small, get quick wins, and scale quickly. I love the term, just go fast and break things. You
Mhm.
learn more from the mistakes. I've had spectacular failures in my career, and I've always learned more than having a really good successful piece, right? The successful piece almost feels like what I miss, right? I think that we are very risk adverse inside of the built environment, specifically in the architectural engineering construction space. A sole practitioner or a plumber with a Ford F-150, don't be afraid of the simple things because they will make a difference. Things like Copilot for your
Mhm.
Microsoft Office, start the process because guess what? Your competition may be already there. And the bottom line is if I can take care of my HR, my accounts payable, my banking, all those things, you don't have to worry about, spot the robot dog coming out and taking your job on the job site. Because you're able to take care of the mundane, you can focus on more human things. And that's what I mean about AI making us more human.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining. I mean, your wealth of knowledge over the years of how 3D has transformed and continuing to transform the built environment is amazing. So where can people find you if they want more?
Any airline, usually row 2B. That's
Yeah.
that's the Shakespeare seat, but right? So yeah, I'm up pretty prolific on social media. Again, just getting the word out. I do have a bestseller. It's called Unlocking the Metaverse. A bestseller on Amazon, which has been fun. By the way, authors make no money, so I'm not doing it to make money. It's about getting the word out.
Yeah.
It's about getting the word out, and because it's too noisy out there, especially with everyone crowing about this thing and that thing and crunching this and whatever. At the end of the day, it's going to be the value of what you've left behind is what's important. And I think that a lot of value that we don't talk about in business, because it has a double-edged sword to it, I think we need to love each other better. And I'm not talking about the romantic Me Too type of love. I'm talking about the love of yourself, the love between the work in you and just the love and spirit. I think that we need to embrace that more in business. And I just wish the listeners all the love in the world.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.